Hi, welcome back to National Novel Writing Month here at Story Mantra. We are pleased to be back, and we are going to start again from where we left off last week.
Thank you, Lindsay, for bringing us in, and we are excited to once again talk with Kathy Meis. She is the incredible founder of Publish, which is a world's first complete publishing platform with integrated marketing, branding, and discoverability. Kathy is also the senior editor, former of Forbes Incorporated National Circulation, which is incredible. She's had 25 plus years in media and publishing industry, and guys, get a load of this. She is a professional editor, journalist, and ghostwriter. She speaks and blogs frequently about books, marketing, publishing, author brand building in the digital age. Thank you for joining us today. And Kathy, we couldn't be more thrilled to have you on board. So tell us all about marketing, the concept of building brands, and everything we need to know.
Yeah, so I always talk, you got the manuscript, right? And you have all these next steps to go through. And typically, around that time, you're working with an editor. That's really important to understand, to work with an editor who understands the readership in your genre or on your topic. Then you're also thinking about the book as a product for the first time, right? Like, how are you going to package this? How are you going to talk about it? Your synopsis, your blurb. What other people are you going to get to talk about the book, right? So you have what we call social proof, that without a brand name, like, who knows that this is of value? So for first-time authors, especially, making sure that you start to line up those advocates for your work early. And if they happen to have big names, all the better. And sometimes if you do that work early and you share your work early, you can get real momentum from some big players. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But the big thing is, and I always say the independent authors make the biggest decisions about their book when they have the least information about what publishing is all about, right? So a lot of people start their book cover and they're like, I just love this image. And that's what becomes the cover. But book covers are meant to sell books, and they play two big roles. First, that the visual tells enough about the mood, the story, the essence of the book, that it captures their eye, because that's the first thing you see on a product page or when you pick up a book in a bookstore. And then there's a thing called metadata, which people don't realize. And whatever your title is there a subtitle? Is there a series title? And a series would indicate to some readers they will only read books in certain genres if they're part of a series. And I see that mistake made all the time. Like, they don't indicate that it's book one of a series. So no one knows it's a series. So these series readers skip because they didn't know that one little thing on the book cover. But also making sure that the image looks like it fits on the shelf in your genre, but also pops out. And that the title, and if there's a subtitle, the words a novel, that's actually a subtitle that you'll see put on a lot of books. Just notice it. It's just the littlest thing. But if you have a kind of, a title that could be nonfiction or is hard to tell, in 1 second, I know it's a novel. Okay. That makes a big difference when you have me on that product page for only 7 seconds. So cover's really important. Then
Kathy, a quick question, since you're addressing covers, and this is something that took me the third manuscript to figure out.
Yeah.
What does branding mean, and what should authors think about, writers think about when they're looking at branding? What does it even mean?
So branding is, at its essence, if you just boil it down to the one phrase, it is the promise that you make to readers. So if you think about now that, okay, what is your promise to readers? That is the brand. But the key is, to get to that simple concept, you have to do a lot of work, right? The other thing about brands that people don't realize is brands cannot ever be built without an audience in mind. You cannot build a brand without knowing who your audience is. So people think about brands like this, but brands are like this. They always have an audience. Brands speak to audiences. And again, this goes back to our last conversation. If you want to build an author brand, you need to know who you're speaking to. And then the promise needs to be aligned with that readership, right? Like, what kind of reading experience are you going to give me if I'm in your target audience? And so that, you know, I think is a big thing that people don't realize about brands. And again, like, you think of, you know, some of the most recognizable brands in the world, they have color palettes, they have fonts, they have taglines, but it all boils down to this experience, right? Like, how does Coca-Cola really get away with selling us, you know, just caramel colored water that, you know, with their secret recipe, but they're a lifestyle, right? Like, you see the red and it speaks to you about the lifestyle around that. And brands that, you know, deliver on an experience, and authors need to deliver on an experience too. So at its essence, if you can boil it down to that promise, that's the beginning of a brand. The other thing is that, you know, brands are built over time as you build community around your work. And I think what I see is when an author can, say in a series, start to release a novella at the front of that series, and then they just see every story in that series is purchased. Like, you just see what's called the read through. And then they go to all the other work that author has ever made outside the genre, whatever. That's the beginning of a brand, because that means that their name stands for a type of reading experience that delighted that reader, right? So when you start to see read through of your work, and it even jumps genre, whatever, that's the beginning of a brand. And we love to build brands. And, you know, I think that's something that New York did really, really well. I think it's harder. It's very expensive to build a brand. It takes time. It takes content on a regular basis, I think, especially for indies. But it also takes an understanding of the audience and a relationship with them around that promise. And maybe part of your promise is, you know, a sense of community around your books. You know, some of the biggest authors in the world, you know, you think of Nicholas Sparks, like, I'm not in his target audience, but, you know, he was in bookstores all over the South, hand signing, talking. He used to answer every letter that was ever written to him. You know, Margaret Atwood's one that's just amazing, with always, you know, being very active, talking to her community of readers. So it's about the promise. It's about delivering on that promise in your manuscript, in the books that you give your readers, and then whatever else you promise around the experience of writing.
So Lindsay, can I ask you something, since you read for literary agents based on an editor, you know, Kathy, and what she has said, your experience, when you read a newbie's work, a new author coming in, do you also look for that sense of branding when you're reading their work? Or does it automatically feel to you?
There's a feel of something that has been written for a specific audience. When it is written, when a thriller or a specific genre is written correctly, they have, oh, I'm sorry, something's making noise. I apologize. They have a proper feeling to it. Now, here's what's interesting with reading for a literary agent. It used to be we gave you like 10 or 30 pages. If it is not well written in the first 3, and I can't tell that it is properly done, hit the marks of what has to happen in the first 3 pages, we don't read any further.
3 pages.
Do you think that's because of the whole prevalence of the look inside feature now, like that the book literally has to sell itself? Do you think that's
probably part of it, is that if I'm not sold in those first 3 pages, then the person in the look inside. I think it's also because the market has gotten so competitive.
Yeah.
And there are so many manuscripts being submitted that if they aren't ready for, if they can't be commercialized in such a way that will be profitable, at least in that traditional publishing space, which is what an agent is doing, it's not worth wasting the time, because there is so much product out there that you really have to be the best of the best at this point.
Yeah, and I would say too, no matter how an author wants to publish, that understanding, having read deeply in you know, the genre that they want to write in, or if it is literary fiction, having read deeply, and having studied craft, and also having really, you know, tried out some of their work on an audience that get feedback. Because like you said, like, you have such a short amount of time with an agent, or anyone you're even, you know, vetting for the agents. Like, it's the same thing in the marketplace. If you're selling, if you decided to self-publish, it's the same thing. You just have this much time to get it right, so that you really have to understand how to delight that person who's reading it. You got to get the right person there.
There's so many more avenues to compete with as well, not just books anymore.
Yeah.
So is that what you're also keeping in mind?
I do think, don't you think, both of you are, I think that, you know, streaming TV and the way that people digest video has influenced the way things are written. And maybe vice versa as well. You know, we don't have the attention span we once had as a culture, you know, globally, really, I think. So people have less patience and they have more choices. So there is that. But, you know, that doesn't mean that you can't write something deep and slow. You just have to make sure it's for someone who loves deep and slow writing, you know, like, it's about matchmaking, and you know, and all of that. Like, we were talking about the positioning in our last session. If you study the marketplace, like, you can literally go out, and because these online retailers have millions and millions and millions of books, you can bop around in different categories, and you can find so much interesting information to inform your sense of where your book belongs and what readers are looking for. And those things change over time. They change more quickly than they used to change. And I think that is sometimes because of video. But now, you know, reading is very much on the rise. Part of that is because people are a little bit burned out on the mindlessness of watching, binge watching, and they're thinking, I don't want my mind to go to mush. So, you know, reading is way up during COVID. I've never seen the decline that everyone talks about. It's always really been pretty steady. There's always, you know, a minority of the population that are voracious readers, always has been. And I believe that will stay. But I do believe there's more interaction between the different media. You know, they're looking for a lot more content now because there's a lot of mini shows and series shows. They're doing a lot of experimentation, and they're looking to, Netflix is always looking at the book world for content. Yeah. Right. So I think, you know, there's just a lot more fluidity there. It's storytelling at its essence, you know.
So going back to, you know, what you were honing down on the commercial side of it. Once we, say now we've understood our brand.
Yeah.
Then what's the next thing to do? What should we look into then?
Yeah. And I will say, if you go to our blog, by the way, we have some great videos on the work you can do to find your brand, because it is a process and it does take time and hard work. So, you know, I think the other thing is, what people don't realize is, if you can study the comparable titles as you prepare to go out and do marketing. So if you've really positioned your book well, you know who your audience is, you've created a book cover to attract that audience, it fits in the genre that it pops out, you got a great piece of copy, that synopsis that talks about your book, and now you're ready to market. There's two things. One is the social proof. So there's two types of reviews, and you need to be getting these before you launch. 3 to 6 months before you launch, you need to go on a place like NetGalley. We have a NetGalley program, and it's fabulous now. Used to be very much for traditionally published books. It's been opened up. You'll get librarians, you'll get booksellers, you'll get power reviewers, all reviewing your books. You get their email, you get feedback on your cover, you get feedback on the content of your book. Will they recommend you to Indie Next? So you can get all of this social proof going well before you launch, because you get a couple of great reviews. You can put them as editorial reviews at the top of your synopsis. And if you go on to a place like Amazon, you'll see that all the time. We just launched a book and, you know, Rob Reiner blurbed it. And I could tell you that minute that blurb came in, it was bolded at the top of the synopsis, right? So that's then when someone lands on that page, you know, you're ready to convert that reader because someone that they know, their name says this is a good book. So, so do the little yellow stars, and you want to get that all going before you launch. And so when the product page now, great cover, great synopsis, and social proof, now you can start your advertising and your marketing. Two things, I think, I believe very strongly in pre-order campaigns, because you can actually be selling books. All those sales hit on the first day and really bump your ranking. If you do pre-marketing as well, you can do pre-order campaigns where the booksellers can know it's coming because you're in the Ingram catalog and they know the launch date and they can see the strong reviews that are coming out of a place maybe like NetGalley, or maybe some editorial reviews from a place like Kirkus or Publishers Weekly. And then they're ready to order. So you prime the market. And then you also should start advertising that the book is coming before it actually launches. On a place like Amazon, you can run Amazon ads. That's when you really want to know those comp titles and those keywords people are using, the other authors that are like yours. So if they land on those pages and they see your ad, it's the right reader, right? And now they're going to come over to your product page and it's primed for that conversion to them going into the look inside feature, which is, you know, designed to delight them and draw them in, or right to a purchase. And, you know, pricing is also another interesting way. You know, if your goal is really to get your name out there, maybe you don't make it a $9.99 ebook. You know, maybe you price it so that the price of the ebook is frictionless, that the purchase is instant. You know, maybe you do Amazon KDP Select for not 90 days. We're not huge fans of going narrow. I like to go broad, but you can do things like price pulsing. So if your goal is to get your book into the hands of as many people as possible, advertising with a lower price can be a great strategy. You know, that's another thing that people do as they write a book at the front of a series, that it's shorter, gives people a taste of the work, and then they get read through. The other thing that you really need to start doing well before you launch is giving a sample on your website. So, you know, have that pop up and you're capturing emails and you're letting the sampling is really powerful. At Publish, we have what I call the rough cut book bubbles, where you can share those excerpts well before you launch, and you can keep sharing them. And then the pre-order button comes up when that happens, and then you switch it over to a buy button. Sampling is very, very powerful. Making sure you're also hitting those bloggers that are in your genre, so that, you know, the world of readers in your audience, in your genre, are aware well before launch that this book is coming. So when it comes, there's already an audience waiting for it, because that's the saddest thing. And I see that all too often. You know, people launch into silence, and their launch day is when they start thinking about marketing.
So how much advance time would you suggest? But apart from the 3 to 6 months, you know, is there more that authors should look into? More time?
Well, I mean, you know, you can set up pre-orders even a year in advance on some sites. Amazon just changed their policy on that. So I think that you at least have to build in 6 weeks. I think if you want traditional outlets to be part of your social proof, to give you editorial reviews, you need to be 3 to 6 months out, because you need to be sending out physical ARCs or advanced reader copies to the key places. Like if the library market is really important as a distribution channel, you need to be in Library Journal, and that they're going to look at that book, you know, at least 4 months in advance, and they want a physical copy. Mm-hmm. So that means a lot of planning on the book, on the editorial and the production side to get to an advanced reader copy.
Right.
Yeah, pre-marketing's probably one of the biggest mistakes I see is there's just not a sense of thinking about the marketing in tandem with the editorial and production. I mean, there's so much you can do, again, bringing people into that journey. You know, you can bring them into the writing, you can bring them into the cover reveal, you can bring them into the review process, you can bring them in as beta readers. And if you do that, you know, you are building community around your work. It feels great. It's a little extra work while you're still working on the book, but it sure is a lot more fun when you launch and people are listening and people are aware.
Sure.
You know, the silence is what's really hard to watch, you know?
Yep. I agree with you there.
Yes, and we are at time again. So thank you, Kathy, for being here again. Anyone interested in self-publishing, even just developmental edits, learning how to make your book as marketable as possible, visit publish.com. You won't be sorry. Good luck to everyone involved in National Novel Writing Month, and we will see you next week. Thank you.
Kathy, thank you so much for being with us.
It was great. Thanks for having me.